My name is Cheryl. I'm the owner and curator for Mouse House Gallery. We put on this show. We have Megan Louie, Bob Merrick, Mike Ross, and John Corbin here for our artist talk. Danielle was not able to make it. She had a baby last week, so project not yet. To kind of start, just kind of go over when I presented this idea to you guys about utilizing patterns in your artwork and bringing everything together, kind of how you foresee making artwork, especially Bob with your 3D printing. I know a lot of people are curious on how that came about. And go from there. So John, if you want to kick it off.
No pressure. I mean, I suppose I took it really literally. I had already done, so that's my piece right there. So I had already done some zebra artworks. So the idea of pattern was sort of a no-brainer. It was like, oh yeah. And then I just thought, multiply the pattern. So if I ask myself, well, why zebra? I'm sort of interested in the pattern of the skin. I was introduced to Chat GPT the other night, an actual introduction to it. And I don't know, for those of you who are like sort of slightly freaking out about Chat GPT, I'm just gonna tell you all, if you have an Alexa or a Siri, you've already been doing it. It seems to be the exact same thing. I didn't want to ruffle the feathers of my friend who was really blown away by it. But I asked the question to it, which actually interested me. He said, ask it a question. And I said, does the mobility of the sperm of a zebra affect the stripes of the pattern of the zebra? Because I had just read an article about this. And it was a she voice that said back to me in a very authoritative voice, no, there was no scientific evidence whatsoever, which caused me a great deal of conflict because I thought, but I just read this article from the same sources that you're gathering your information from, but it ended there. So that's part of my interest in the pattern. And then part of it, the zebra thing, comes from the idea of them being, well, they're really not black and white, but that idea of black and white, being two extremes, like black, white, and I'm always thinking everything's in between. And I'm going to retitle it, What's Black and White and Blue All Over. A nun who fell down the stairs last week. Anyway, that's enough.
That's a good one. That's good. I don't know if I can follow that. Well, I was pretty excited to be invited into a pattern show. From the start, I've always thought of my work in terms of patterns, like the piece that's on the other side of that wall there that you can't see right now, but you can look at it later, perhaps you walk around and seen it already. It's just real basic pattern. It's just alternating stripes, and that's from 2011, 2012, something like that. So I've always been kind of working in those sorts of patterns, and I've always been interested in the idea of what happens when the pattern kind of gets disrupted, I guess. I've always kind of thought of one of my responsibilities as an artist to sort of create a set of rules and then figure out interesting ways. So pattern is one way to do that, and I think it does get interesting when the pattern does get broken or altered or shifts over time, whatever. I've always been interested in music of people like Steve Reich and Brian Eno, even in the way they sort of set these similar kinds of parameters where they'll start out a piece of music with a pattern and see how it kind of disintegrates, alters, changes, but in these sort of tiny increments. And by the end of a piece, it's completely different than what it started out as. So all those ideas are interesting to me. Over time, my work has gotten a little bit more, embraced a little bit more chaos and everything. Like, you know, that over there, that little square is a newer piece, and you know, it's clearly a different sort of pattern work than the one that's over there. And then I'm also interested in, you know, the shape of a canvas and the way that can affect, you know, the content of the canvas and those kinds of patterns. So, yeah, that's where I come to it.
Does the shape happen at the same time as the imagery?
Sometimes, you know, I don't make a lot of sketches ahead of time, but I will, especially with these kind of shape pieces, multi-piece ones, I'll sort of sketch out an idea of a shape, and I'll have some ideas. Like, I knew I was going to do these 3 shapes with this sort of like almost capsule shape in the center of it. And I had a few ideas of what was going to go inside that, but
So there are the images as well as the shape here.
yeah. I mean, to
That's
me,
right. I mean, that's within the last few years.
yeah. And to me, you know, I like I don't know, the creative process to inform each step, like building the canvases. To me, is in some ways with pieces like that just as important as what is being painted on canvas. So, yeah,
You stretch a really beautiful canvas.
thank you. A lot of
For
trial
those
and
of you
error.
who don't, like, you should check out how beautiful the corners are as they go around the edge.
A lot of trial and error with pieces like that. I will admit, on one of those, one of the edge pieces, you know, how they're very sharp.
Yeah.
I had gotten to the very end, I had stretched the entire thing, and I got to that last corner down, bottom or top, whatever, and I pulled, and breath.
Yeah.
And I just had to pull it all off and start over again. So, yeah, stuff like that happens. But it's not.
My turn. Hi, I'm Robert Meyer, Rob, Bob, whatever you want to say. I brought 6 pieces for the show when Michelle asked me, and 5 of them are really current, but then there's the one painting that's the first thing I brought in that's about a little bit more than 25 years old. But I wanted to bring that in because that series of paintings, you can almost see that I'm starting to realize that everything you get off the panel and off the frame, I'm concerned with the object. So it's kind of just before I left that I left the non-framed object work. The other work, just chronologically, about within the last couple of years, is these new pieces with the 3D printing element involved the filament. And those large pieces that involve 3 circular ones are based on the idea of osmosis, where material gathers and then at one point it just separates and becomes 2 different things. So you kind of see the stretch forming in these, but it's just in a subtle way. So this is different types of materials that could form with that kind of like cell reproduction, if you think of these as cells. And then there's another series that I started and have since been integrating the 3D filament to. And these pieces are based on a series I call Seeds, Comets, and Shuttlecocks. It gives you an idea that I don't think of one thing at one time. There's all things that percolating up here, and I just try not to land on anything specific. So if I don't land on anything specific, I don't have to worry about anything specific when it's up here. And the more non-specific it seems to me, I always think it works better. So, but this is kind of a bridge between the 3D material and the seed pieces. So the most current series is the mitosis work, and then there's this one pedestal piece. Sometimes I brought this one because there's an occasion where I generally just number pieces, and as you know, and they're roughly chronological, but there are pieces like that one painting I brought in that's also got a title, so it's got a number, and the title is Sponge Diver. I don't know if you can see it, but that white yellowish piece in the bottom, that big blob is a sponge, and that's a hand grabbing it. You don't know that it's a hand until you got close to see the little gauge on its wrist, which is one of those diver gauges. So without me telling you that, I doubt the title would help you with that. So occasionally I do things that I say for a specific thing to illustrate, like I thought of a big idea this one diver, right? But here, you know, I'm thinking of there, it's hard to say. And that's what makes it fun for me, that's hard to say stuff. So with that being said, this pedestal piece, everyone knows the Spanish artist Goya.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was deaf, right? And he had hard, I don't know if he was deaf his entire life, but I know his later years he was pretty much deaf and he could read lips. And this is kind of a spin on his eardrum. He used one of those horns when people had to talk to him. So one end's black, one end's sensitive. I think it was one deaf and on both sides, but one was worse than the other. So there's a great film out with Stellan Skarsgård plays Goya. And so this is a kind of an homage to Goya. So occasionally there's more than a number, but, and with that, we can finish up here. I always take questions, so if you have any questions specifically about materials, I can please free to raise a hand.
Is that all 3D printed?
None of it's 3D printed.
No, none.
So the top is plywood,
Oh, it is.
laminated plywood. And then the pieces on the end here, you see they're all different colors. Well, if you know with this 3D filament stuff, with this printing filament, it comes in different colors. So and it comes in a pen that's not on like a hot glue gun. So when you get rid of a color, you have to back it out, which takes a while because it's a old machine. It's a simple machine that takes a while to run it out. Or you can just let the color spit out through the end if you don't need it. So I was spitting out all this extra color and then starting to make little beads from the span out color. So that's like the vomits of the other pieces. And they're all like individual components, so I just strung them through the wire. But the idea of this piece, I knew had something to do with this expulsion, this spewing or whatever it was. I thought that worked perfect with that form. So I kind of based the portals on the scale of the 3D stuff. So that's where that came from. Did I answer?
Because it comes across the upper portion that comes across as ceramics.
Well, it's the same principle, and most people are thinking of it as ceramic, but it's literally just a shape that's just reduced in size and just laminating multi-purpose plywood, and it can be a difficult material, but it's also a really easy thing to cut and manipulate. So, any more questions?
Okay. Hello, I'm Megan Lilly. I do PP, work around in regards to patterns. So these works were inspired a lot by nature, and I'm really fascinated by how a lot of nature it revolves around patterns and fractals, and there is a repetition and pattern to it, and especially with these. There's this phrase, texture of the honeycomb. As we all know, like, honeycomb is obviously a texture, but it's also, I just find it so fascinating too that it's the most structurally sound shape possible with the most amount of inside area to hold honey. It's just funny and so interesting to me how nature found the most logical, best solutions for the problems that animals and insects and just the whole planet, everything. There's these interesting solutions that resolve themselves through patterns and how nature finds its way. So a couple of the different things that are featured in, and there's also these literal patterns of like, there's the checkerboard, I guess they used the mask pattern, a lot of these other pieces. There's a lot of different materials. So there's modeling medium that makes like the honeycomb, these paper as a collage, had some interest and meaning sometimes to each piece, and then like leaves form in a fractal, so there's a pattern in the leaves, there's a pattern in the way that echinacea form their petals and everything. So
The honeycomb good, it's really, just like that's medium you use?
it's the medium, and then I actually it's funny, I use it I got from with a 3D printer, and I had a lot of my other work uses this crisscross pattern, which was a found object. It's a damping pad, which is something that you slide into machinery to make it vibrate less. My husband brought one home from the machine shop, and he had this cool diamond pattern on it, and I was like, it's gonna have one when I do this. And it pulls up, and it makes a very interesting pattern. And you can play with the modeling, even like how much and make different kinds of peaks. And so I called my friend with the 3D printer, and I was like, can you make honeycomb? And they're like, yeah. so me and the husband, we did the CAD to get the honeycomb, printed it out, and that's how I do that.
Is it like holding on or is it flat?
It's like a little flat 3x3 thing, and it's like this raised, and you just pop it on and pull it off, and trial and error, and use a lot of water for race. I like it better that way. And make these shapes with it, and the entire process is pretty intuitive. I go like, I want shapes here, 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 and here, and then just build the composition as it goes.
So you said you use Damask patterns? Do
Yeah,
you use them directly from?
I use a stencil and spray paint. Yeah.
Is it the same print and all?
No, not all of them. There's echinaceans in quite a few. That one over there, that one over there. That one's a cherry blossom. A lot of them are either native plants to Michigan or related, or the ones that grow relatively well here. It was just a personal choice. I don't know if there was a meaning behind why I did that. But yeah, so echinacea, or also it's called coneflower. It's really known. It's a great plant to have in your garden. You see them everywhere, and great for bees. Great for, I think, monarchs. One of the butterflies uses them. Fun fact. Things you'll learn while making art, right?
Do you plan ahead of time of kind of your subject matter?
I have a big idea. Like, I'm like, I know I'm doing a beach painting, we're doing some honeycomb, I'll usually have like an idea of what plants that I want. Sometimes it's a little bit more defined than that, like I want it to have this kind of composition, or I'm gonna try and just do as much honeycomb as humanly possible and see how that goes. Do the tertiaries? Oh. But sometimes it's less than that, and it's literally just clear my mind, let's see what happens.
John, can you talk a little bit more about how you do your composition? Because it's cardboard, correct?
Yes, it is cardboard. I like cardboard a lot. I thought somehow I had stumbled onto genius at one point in my life. That I was anywhere in the entire Western world, and noticing that every morning that there would be cardboard containers delivered to sort of retail shops. And then I went to Mexico, and I noticed that everybody had all of their deliveries at retail shops in large canvas bags. And I'm actually tracing this back in my mind now, when I just thought, I'm not going to make paintings on canvas. I'm going to make paintings on cardboard. It doesn't sound genius anymore, but at the time it just seemed so unbelievably interesting. And then the truth is, over the last few decades, it's just become sort of something about the environment. You know, and especially now, I never saw this coming. If I did, you wouldn't know me, because I would be living on my yacht that I had made in the Netherlands that couldn't fit under the bridge. I would be Jeff Bezos, because I would have figured out like that everybody would want all of their stuff delivered in cardboard containers every single day to their house. But when I see them, I think to myself, they took something that's packaged in cardboard and they stuck it in another cardboard box and filled it with a padding so it could be shipped, and then it arrives at your house 24 hours later, and the cardboard outer container is immediately disposed of. So embedded into my interest in cardboard is that. But then I have to admit, I love the corrugation in cardboard.
Yeah.
I like seeing it, and I like painting the cardboard. So I gesso my sheets of cardboard, and this is as abstract-y as I get, is that it's fun to paint the cardboard, because once it has its surface of gesso, for all intent and purpose, it's not that much different than almost any other surface you paint on, because you're really painting on the gesso. I'm giving you this lesson in how paintings work. But then I paint it in all different ways. Like I'll become an abstract expressionist, and then other times I'll just let it sort of run onto it, and I'll paint layer over layer of it and scrape it back. And that in no way, shape, or form would that be satisfying enough to me. So then I use it, I think the way maybe somebody who is involved in mosaics would then cut those pieces of glass or cut those pieces of ceramic. Well, I just cut pieces of cardboard. So that's what you see is, and what I like about it is it, I like the different surfaces. So I use acrylic and oil paint and tempera paint. I like the idea of making a painting that's made of multiple painting mediums. Because I think it has something to do with time. I teach, and so I know students think that oil paint is the most important thing because their education taught them that the serious artists use oil paint. And so they resist using acrylic paint because they think that it's less serious, which is hilariously funny, just between you and me, it's hilariously funny. And then tempera paint conjures up an entire other time period. So I like the idea that in the mediums it has something to do with time.
So the cardboard is painted before it's cut out?
Oh yeah.
That's
Yeah.
really good.
It's just sheets of cardboard.
Yeah.
And I imagine, like while I'm doing it, because I've gotten much more organized, like all of my blue cut up cardboard is in one container, all of my yellow is in another container, just so that I can grab them. And I keep the absurdly most tiniest pieces. I don't know why. Because sometimes I think it would be so much, but it's true, I might use them. But part of it is just that the brush strokes don't get controlled by cutting the cardboard. Like when I'm painting the cardboard, the brush strokes can be fairly controlled, but then when I cut them, they all go in different directions. And so then when I apply them, there's all these different ways of painting. I really like painting a lot, and generally when I look at paintings, I just look at the paint. It takes me like 5 minutes to get to the subject. I'm just really just looking at the medium itself. And so that's why I'm sort of influenced by that, like how many different ways of painting can you make? And in this case, I sort of slathered blue on a piece of cardboard, ultimately knowing that it was going to be a black piece of cardboard, and then I painted over it with black. And I did the same thing with every color. And the idea of it was that some of that color might peek through the black or the white, and it does, obviously, in some places more than in other places. That's the hidden technique.
It really rewards, like it looks great from back here, it really rewards looking up close too, like at the opening, I was like,
Yeah,
I was staring at it 3 inches away for a long time. There's a lot of interesting things going on.
it's true, like when they're photographed, they look, but that's the plight of photographing anything, mostly is that it just flattens everything, and you just see the image. You don't see the technique or the process at all. There's no excuse for it. It's just, it's sort of fun to make something and look at your own thing and go, okay, this is really weird. So I did this new thing with this piece, and then I'll shut up. I did this new thing where I decided, I'm in a really heavy semester now of teaching, and so I thought, I can probably carve out about 100 hours for this piece. And so I decided I was going to keep a schedule like a skilled craftsperson. Like I was actually going to punch in every time. And so I had a little notebook, and every single time I worked, I wrote down the number of hours. And some days there was just 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours, 12 hours. Like the last week is just like 10 hours, 12 hours, 12 hours. And I decided I'm going to do that from now on. I'm just going to keep this schedule of it. And then when I was looking at it myself, like taking myself out of the whole thing, I was thinking, this is just stupid. Like there's more to life than this is done. Like, what is it? And then I looked at it. No, I know, I mean, it is, it's like when I look around, I think everybody should feel this way. You know, I was looking at it, I was thinking, so am I under the impression that somebody is gonna wanna hang this over their server in their dining room? Even I'm looking at it like that and going, huh. But I'm not gonna stop doing it because it's good therapy, right?
Yeah, it's good there.
You just pick up cardboard wherever now?
I do pick, I'm very picky about the cardboard now in the sense that I don't want it to have any, dents or imperfections in it. Because that also stays with it, and it also makes it unstable. I was doing these cardboard pieces, like, this is really how I got into graduate school. I was doing this cardboard work and then immediately stopped doing it. But in graduate school, one of my advisors, we were talking about it, and I said, well, I'm a little bit concerned about, the stability, how long they'll last. And he looked at me and he went, oh, these are gonna last a lot longer than you're gonna want them to. And I laughed, and he said, I got it right away. I think he would be very dismayed that I was doing this. I would be uncomfortable about it.
Bob, can you talk a little bit more about your technique with creating, like, this piece here, how you made the shapes?
So there's a difference between everyone except the one you just pointed to, that piece that has the barbell shapes in it. That's actually a wooden dowel with wooden balls at the end, so there's a support underneath the filament that I'm wrapping around it. So that is different than the others, which are all freestanding. It's just the material, just the 3D filament that you can bond to each other. And if you create a flat image or shape, you can heat it up to a degree and then twist it and form it, and in seconds it'll stick and become the shape you want it. So it's really, really pliable and fixable material. Plus, in breaking it, it's easy just to get the welding done on it. And you're really welding it with the plastic filament, so breaks are just, random. You wouldn't know a break happened, or it was just the filament coming out of the end of the pen. So it's a very interesting material. And they have all kinds of different colors, from wood to clear to these chromatic ones that have different tones and surfaces.
How long does it take you to create a sculpture?
Sorry?
How long does it take you to create a sculpture like this?
Well, the only reason I have to say this, I say that every time when someone asks that, it's usually supposed to say your age, because you can't do anything before you know what other stuff to get to the point. But in reality, the problem with these things is because it's so modular, it's just spending days in the studio making these shapes, so it's, you count that time, it's, dozens of hours, if not, it's tens of hours now, or 5s of hours. But maybe assembly-wise, 2 to 3 weeks maybe.
So is there a plan in advance that you get that shape that
Yes.
has what I'm calling that sort of X?
Yep.
In the system?
There's plans, drawings for everything. Usually, no, these will all be drawn.
Okay.
Once I've got it drawn, it's really just all production. And again, it's not just
Right.
get to doing it. So.
Talk
And so-
about wood templates that you make.
Oh yeah, so I do create these. Thank you, my wife asked that. I have to give her credit now at the bottom. Anyways, so I make these little jigs or forms that those shapes are created flat. You can see, and then I just kind of squirt out, for lack of a better word, the filament from the pen until it fills that shape. Then I can just pry it out, just like cookies or muffins, right? And then you can do the flexing by reheating, where you take a torch to the whole thing and do the same thing. You really got to be careful because the temperature to the spot where they become liquid, becoming solid, is a couple of degrees. So I've had little puddles happen with these, but.
Explain to me the pen, I'm completely ignorant of the device.
Oh, it looks like a small light glue gun. It's a thick fat pen for $50 is the best you can buy. You cannot buy anything
Okay.
that's more expensive than $50.
And how is it feeding the medium in?
Just like hot glue gun, you stick the filament in the end, and
Okay.
the motor runs it through, right? You can select different temperature, because there are a couple of different types of filament that have different qualities that need different temperatures. And actually, once it comes out of the pen in a second or two, you can touch it. It cools that quickly, so you can manipulate it pretty quickly.
And then you create, for that piece, did you repeat a similar shape over and over again?
That's one shape.
That's one shape, okay, because I can see it obviously in the brown at the bottom there.
As are the other one, maybe have a couple or three different shapes, but they're singles, it's just a color variant. That's,
Okay.
Do you like use a mold or?
Yeah, well, the small, the independent components I use them all, but
Okay.
the overall form is just a drawing of the parameter, like the certain, circumference and size, scale.
So with the barbell one,
Yeah.
you made the barbells out of a dowel?
A dowel with ball rules.
Two.
And those are all variants in terms of length, but the same dowel thickness and the same ball thickness, so it's just a variant. And that one's was closest to that whole DNA idea of both the things meshing. But it is a lot stronger because it is predominantly wood. That's 60% wood, the rest is filament, whereas the rest is 100% filament. So.
And the filament you use as the adhesive, so that
It sticks to itself, so you can wrap around stuff that stick to. You'll find out what it can or can't stick to. Unfortunately, it sticks to your fingers pretty well too when it's on. So.
The entire process is completely hidden in the pieces. Like I was, without any knowledge of how any sort of like high-tech manufacturing something like this would be, like you could have told me any story, like literally.
Well, they're really pretty low tech because they're not.
Right.
When someone said somebody
Yes.
printed it out from the dollar, just render it on
Right.
just like a pencil.
Yeah.
But it's easier.
So the way you're drawing, but with this
Yes, exactly.
sort of thick.
A lot of fashion designers are using now for garments, for this lace type stuff, and it doesn't have to last for very long. And they have molds of the garment stuff. They just push it out.
Well, we were looking at them before, before we all started, and I immediately started thinking, oh, people in jewelry design must be.
Yes, yes.
And now that you're describing what you are doing, I realize, oh, well, they're just having a heyday with this.
Yeah, it's relatively
And
inexpensive.
yours wouldn't be very comfortable as jewelry.
It's around your neck. You have to be careful with scale a little bit, I think, with these. I think I'm getting to the point where I don't know if I can go much larger than that. I'll do weight too with those things.
But then you could actually do it in individual components that
Yes,
then you would marry together, right? Like
Yeah,
that
or
would
they
be
can just freestanding next to each other.
Yeah.
Because the attachment is really just you're welding the same pen. You're not using it to draw anymore. You're using it to
Yes.
glue stick. So
You just changed my mind.
there you go. You'll get an
Do
interest.
you like science fiction?
Oh yes.
Because that's so, like, there's 100 different science fiction films, but most notably, dude, it's just so the worms.
That's the one stuff. So. Unleash the Kraken.
Now, are they as light as hot glue?
Probably later, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's only like a 16th of an inch diameter. What you see there in the pattern is the thickness of it. Oh, it comes out of it too. There's a secondary thickness one that may be a larger pen, but it's twice as thick. But I haven't seen any advantage to using it. But maybe there is. I have to find a pen that runs it because I mistakenly bought too thick of filament once and thought. Do that, but you can use it without a pen. You throw the stuff down on the mold and torch it into the form of a mold too. So the pen is just ancillary, as is the printer.
I just like the idea that it's sort of 3D drawing.
Yep.
It's really
Allegedly, they say you can draw in here and create stuff. And that's in space you could, but there's no air. But by the time it comes out of the thing, you got a couple of seconds before your skip and slip would stay vertical or in space. But if it's quicker than that, it's going to loop pretty easily. But I don't know if you know how Antonio Gaudi did his architectural models. He spreads that hung from the ceiling with weights. So you can use their structure hanging upside down and use gravity to control that drip. So it'll be chilled here by the time it's not there. So, and then once that's done, you can go the other way. So there's tricks you learn. And you got all my secrets.
Do they require any special care, like if you were to hang them up in your house, like things to avoid?
Well, I guess dust is a big thing on these, and of course hanging them is the same material, it's different, so I just kind of use not filament on them, but No, and I think that's an issue with scale bars if they got too big, I think it would be more brittle.
Plus, if they were in direct sunlight, they'd probably,
Is that
if they were in direct sunlight, they would
Oh, sunlight, yeah, I had one in sunlight, and I think that they are starting to have a really long,
definitely lose some
discoloration on some of the colors, others not.
integrity of structure. and so-
Yeah. Now, there is a new polymer out that's really interesting. It's the same filament, but it's powdered color, whatever color you choose, but it's got powdered metal in it. It's called sintering. And so the end product of that coming out of the pen, it melts off this polymer. It doesn't keep it this time. And then that heat causes that powdered metal to join and expand, so you're literally shooting up metal that you can treat as metal, you can polish it and hammer it on. So that's pretty much changed everything. I mean, it's for space. I mean, it's really designed for space with those 3D printer sheets. It's just putting a spot there and adding things to it. So
So that would really be like a metal welding. It
Yes.
could treat as metal welding.
That probably would be impervious sticky, more so anyway.
yes, good point.
Well, maybe that's why they experimented with the idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a dream having someone that shoot out with metal that you can form. So I don't know how far it's going to go. And I haven't seen the quality of it to know how much it is similar to actual metal and how close that thing bonds with those metal powders. If it's a solid piece of metal, or is it, you see little pockets where the powders are next to each other. You know?
So does this piece start with an armature that is?
It just had a one single jig that I made with concentric circles, so the 1, 2, 3, 6 different circles, and I just repeated the filling it in. Pretty monotonous, but also really assembly.
No, it's
The other thing that's not like is being able to stitch things together, like those rings are stitched. That's really what they say you can do, but that's about the distance you can get if you're sticking it in free.
Okay.
But that's a real, or a gestural type of drawing that you do that way.
When we were talking about that, it sort of, it has this kind of appearance of being spider web-like.
Yes, it's very spidery. You
And
get-
then when you're
you
describing
get
it, it
very
really
spider-like
feels.
feeling doing it,
Yeah.
yes.
Mike, question for you, this piece out in the hallway, how, did you plan to have a curved or different shapes, like board, or a
Yeah,
little bit more about those?
I'm always kind of playing with the idea of how to create the sort of shapes that I'm seeing in my mind, I guess, you know. So that piece is one recent iteration of how that came about. That was one where, you know, I was just kind of doodling around in my sketchbook and working out different shapes and whatever. And that's just one that I came up with, and you know, just cut it out with a jigsaw, make another, essentially trace that on another piece of wood, cut it out again slightly smaller or larger. Can't remember which one came first, so that it's got like a framework behind it, you know. And that's pretty much how it goes.
And do you plan out your brush strokes, like if you look at his work a little bit closer, there's dots, there's different lines, like do you plan that out ahead of time?
A lot of that is improvised, you know. I'll have a general idea of what's going to be happening where, but then I kind of let it sort of take its own, you know, sort of take on a life of its own where if I'm doing like repeating lines or whatever, and you know, I kind of like the way the paint sort of disintegrates on the brush after a while, and then, you know, as I've got, like, I intentionally don't re-up the paint on my brush, and I'll just kind of let it peter out, for lack of a better term, and then it starts becoming, you know, the dots or circles or whatever, and then I'll go with that for a while, and until it seems like, you know, it's got to become something else. But there's varying degrees of that, you know. Sometimes it is a little bit more planned out, and I seem to kind of go in this, you know, wave pattern of I'll do something that's really tight and sort of almost geometric, and then I'll really feel the need that I have to like loosen up a little bit, you know. And that's when I end up with something like, you know, this box or that piece up there.
Mike, I have a question for you, a process question regarding painting up here, the large one. You have, what is it, oil and acrylic?
The acrylic is
I
just,
was wondering why you use acrylic and when you decided to use acrylic versus oil, and what's part of the painting?
yeah, I enjoy painting with oil. I don't think it's more important than acrylic.
The reason I'm asking the question is because of the drying time.
Right, well, so in this one, it's very, it's definitely very separated. Everything on that sort of outer edges is high gloss acrylic paint, and then all the detail stuff in the center is all oil paint. So I've been enjoying using the high gloss acrylic paint a lot lately, and I just kind of like the way they sort of set off from each other. Against the oil paints.
It's a really cool conversation. I mean, that's what I'm interested in.
Your decision was subjective, is that what I don't understand your answer.
Oh, I'm sorry. Not so subjective. I've been working with oil paints for much longer than I've been working with acrylic paints.
Right.
So I'm more comfortable with oil paints, I guess I would say. But I also paint a lot of murals, so I do use a lot of like acrylic paints. These came from big cans of paint, I guess.
Were the acrylics open end?
What's that?
Were the acrylics open end paint?
What do you mean?
Is that what they last longer?
Well,
They don't dry as
there's
fast?
2 or 3 different types of acrylic paint in terms of drying time.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I don't know enough about
Okay, I'm just curious.
that stuff to answer that question with any kind of authority. But I will say that those acrylic paints dry really fast.
Well,
So
10 minutes.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, something like that.
It's common acrylic. Okay, thank you.
So yeah, and that's another reason that I like working with oil paints is because they do take so long to dry. Like there's a lot of if I can just sort of get up and point, like there's a lot of gradient things that are happening from here. This goes from like essentially a white to this deeper yellow gold.
Yeah, you're blending all the way through.
So I'm blending all the way through, and it takes a while, So I'm intentionally using oil paint for that because I'm constantly going back to the palette to change the.
Then did you scribe your lines after you paint?
No, that was actually, this was a case where it was all pretty much drawn out beforehand. So this is all drawn in with pencil.
Right.
And then filled in with paint. I didn't know exactly what was going to happen with the colors beforehand, but I knew this was going to be the pattern. And this one was an especially tricky one because the way these lines go out and intersect with these lines, and there are gradient things happening in both directions. So I've got to sort of address that, and it's kind of this problem that needs constant attention, which is interesting to me. I think that's part of what makes it sort of challenging and interesting for me.
Can you push all 3 of those pieces together?
They won't fit 100%
Okay.
perfectly. I mean, they were all pretty much made. I mean, those stretchers were made from scratch.
Yeah, sure.
No measuring really or anything happening. So, they're not perfect, but I like that. I mean, I did it intentionally. I could have measured, but I like it to have almost an organic.
If we push the pieces together, the lines wouldn't be concentric.
Yeah, probably not. No, they wouldn't match up
What you've
exactly.
done is you've actually cut through those circles.
Yeah,
Left out a piece.
right,
I think it was
because.
very clever the way you did that.
Right, as it is, like when it was hanging in my studio, these were actually a little bit further away from the centerpiece, both of the end pieces. So you can kind of tell that as I made these circles, if you can imagine this being a little bit, maybe 3 inches further away, the lines would match up. But then after it was finished, I liked the way it hung, a little bit closer together and sort of messed with those lines a little bit.
So in this case, there was a drawing that preceded it on the canvases?
On the canvas.
On the
yeah.
canvases, including the fake drips, which by the way are hilarious.
Love doing stuff like that.
Were those included in the, so you knew that some part of this was gonna fail? Like, it doesn't fail because the drips will never drip.
Right, right.
And talk about how you paint the sides, which is a really big deal.
It is a big deal on pieces like this. Yeah, with that, like I said, they were separated further apart. So working the sides is an interesting problem too, even when drawing it in, because it's like, do I follow the line and keep going up that way, or do I, when I get to the edge, do I go straight in at a right angle? You know, I think in most cases I decided to go straight in. So like, sorry to keep walking out of the camera. Like in this piece right here, you guys can't really see it very well, but as this line hits this edge, it goes straight in. So it's almost like a layer, like you're cutting a cake or something like that. You know, you can sort of see that edge reflected there.
And that one has all four sides painted, like the pattern sort of wraps.
Yeah, that one's way more loosey-goosey.
Right.
But yeah, similar ideas, you know, of going around the edge of it, especially with the canvas that thick. You know, going around the edge, I think just makes it a little bit more, gives it a little more sculptural element, I guess. I did that around the same time as the box. I've got another box like this, it's not here, but so I've been kind of interested in these more 3D kind of elements to paintings. If that answered, hopefully that answers the questions.
Question for Megan. In some of your pieces, there's newsprint.
Yeah.
Is that intentional?
Where to start with the newsprint? So the newsprint was a found object, and I thought it was an interesting juxtaposition with all the natural imagery and newsprint, which is super man-made, it's precise. I thought it was a really interesting juxtaposition of like something really man-made and all these natural forms. So I found the newspaper in a garden, discarded. And I was like, well, mine now. Sorry. And that was the main idea behind it, was the noise of society, of humanity, and then kind of a nature reclaiming, or like symbiosis of both, finding a happy medium. The words though, like I couldn't help but read it as I'm pasting onto things. And I mean, I would look through like the pages, I'm like, what's jumping out to me, what's grabbing my attention, and I would grab some things, and this particular newspaper kind of wasn't my cup of tea. So some of them they would make me think of more negative things going on in my own life, like my family is Ukrainian, and I think one of them has to do with like, it said something about what's going on in Ukraine, so I put that in there. And it has like a mild critique of what's going on, like just nature versus society, what's going on in the world. Very mildly political, honestly, but that's the main message, is that I just found it to be a very interesting mashup of the man-made with these natural forms and patterns. And like my favorite actually is on Haven, right behind you, where there's this bit of crossword puzzle poking out on the side, and I was like, well, that's staying. I like that. But yeah, that's the use of the newspaper, and it kind of changed from one painting. I like clipped out, literally just cut out certain articles and like put them on there, and I don't even know that they had a whole lot to do with why. I just liked the shape of the article. And then other ones I used an entire sheet to completely cover the canvas, because I also personally believe in painting the sides, even though these are framed. So, yeah.
So it's sort of chance operation that the newspaper that you found, and then it becomes kind of autobiographical, because
because of the intention
Ukraine
behind
part
it.
goes into it.
Yeah.
Do you find that, like, when you say that, like, the more random ones, do you find when you're working on it that, like,
It finds
subjects
more
will
meaning.
resonate? Yeah.
Yes,
Start to
sometimes.
make connections.
Yes, making connections, well, even though it's like something I just picked up or something random, I find either meaning or it just seems super appropriate for what I'm working on, and it just ends up all falling together, and yeah. Does that make sense?
Do we have any other questions?
I have one, and it's falling back to my engineering background. Corrugated cardboard was built for adding rigidity, which lent itself to structural strength. When you add that strength, do you ever find yourself tempted to, instead of going 2D, going 3D and going more?
I have done some sort of 3D in the sense of it being relief, like coming out. I have done that. Not often, but I've also, like, it's very rare that I didn't cut something out of this, and probably I will, because as long as I have ownership of the thing, I'm just gonna keep messing around with it. But I often like perforate the surface so that it's open. But I've not done that. I've not made it 3D. I've never made a 3D like cardboard sculpture. I've made many other sculptures, but I've never thought about the cardboard. You know, there's a lot of artists over the last few decades, whenever somebody created aluminum corrugated material, you know, the plies are actually aluminum, and then the corrugations inside, I think it's aluminum is what they're doing, because that would obviously be much more the integrity of the strength of the material. And then the lightness factor, I assume that's why corrugated aluminum exists, because the thickness that you can build it, but then it's so much lighter because it's just corrugated, it's empty space inside, like the honeycomb idea, exactly. And trust me, honeycombs are right up there. But no, I've never made a 3D sculpture. Who knows?
Well, I want to thank everyone for coming and for our 4 artists. This is recording and will be up on the website for those that weren't able to attend, or if you want to listen to it again, should be up within the week.